Hi, Priyanka.
Hello, good evening, and how are you today?
Wonderful. Absolutely amazing. So, what do we have today, Priyanka?
It is the Own Your Future show, a space that is being built for you so that there is always somebody you can turn to as you commit and you own your future. Conversation, pan nuggets, studies, insights, toolkits, learning management system, and a lot more. So, Rajiv, what's the pan nugget for today?
Well, it's an interesting power nugget. It's about what the World Economic Forum talks about the job market scenario. Interestingly, it talks about 86 million jobs will be displaced or repurposed, and some 97 million new roles will be created. And this is all going to happen by 2025. And by the way, what does really come out of this? Reskilling and getting ready for new roles is key to success for anybody who's preparing for the future. And not to forget some very important traits that every person must have in their belt. One, adaptability. Second, resilience. And I promise you guys, we're going to talk a lot more about it as the guest, and the special guest we have is somebody who's really going to take us through a lot more around this. So, Priyanka, let's open the show with a short video before we invite our guest. Well,
Hello,
welcome,
Sonal.
Sonal. Uh, well, we have our special guest, Sonal. I think you're on mute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hi.
Hi,
It's a
Sonal.
it's a good thing I was on mute because I nearly knocked off my glass.
Okay. Well, welcome to our show, the OYF Show, and it's so nice and so wonderful to have you here. To all of you who don't know of Sonal, one, it's bad luck for you. But in case you happen to know her, well, she is a career strategist and a founder of a Supercharge, a channel and something that she runs so passionately every Friday evening. And I think so it's one of the best shows that I've actually seen, where she talks about a lot of things about careers, jobs, and actually open conversations with an amazing group of people. And here she is, somebody who's been an HR director, somebody who's worked across organizations across many countries, and is proficient in many languages. We'll get to know more about it as we start a conversation with Sonal. Welcome once again, Sonal.
Thank
Uh,
you so much for having me.
and as we start our conversation, Sonal, uh, from what I understand, is that you've actually been a job seeker twice over. First, when you probably got out from your college and got into a career that you started way back in India. And then when you moved here in Belgium, where you are currently based out of, when you finished your INSEAD course, you probably got into getting another job or moved into being a job seeker there. Well, it'll be interesting to find out that when you wore the hat twice as a job seeker, one, what was different, and second, what was the real learning that you got out of both the experiences. So here's an experienced job seeker talking to us. Over to you, Sonal.
Oh boy. So actually, I have been a job seeker more than twice. It's been at least 5 times because I've also been laid off multiple times. So every time you're laid off, you have to start over from scratch. So, you dust off, you move on. And every single time, it's like, okay, this is frustrating. This is exhausting. It's exciting. You're feeling all the feels. And the process is not that different. You've got to brush up your materials. I call it my armor, which is my resume, my LinkedIn, my cover letters, all of the ammunition I need. And then outreach. It's boring stuff. It's not exciting, but it has to be done. Getting all the materials ready, doing all the outreach. Hey, I've just been laid off, or I'm just graduating, I'm about to graduate, and I'm looking around if you know someone. The only difference is the technology has evolved between all these years, but not that much else has changed in them. You still have to, it doesn't matter if you have 2 years or 20 years of experience. When you're looking around, you have to do pretty much the same things throughout.
I picked up the word laid off, and maybe we haven't discussed this before, but is it okay, at least in India, if I was to say that I would have that little bit of a knot in my throat? Is that true for everywhere else?
Yeah. There's definitely a stigma associated with it. It's something that, fortunately for me, hasn't bothered me because I've been in HR. I've also laid people off, and I've actually followed their work for a very long time, and I've seen them do well after leaving the company. In fact, I would say they've done better. So I'm like, why is that? Sometimes it's just about the fit. Sometimes it's completely, restructuring, impersonal balance sheet type of numbers. They say it's very personal. Yeah, it is personal, but at the end of the day, profitability, margins, revenues, all of the metrics, I mean, it's a serious business, and the labor cost is expensive. So I have a little bit more neutral view on it. I remember very well that in December 2019 I made a video on LinkedIn where it was pretty open and vulnerable, and I talked about, I called it being fired, because you can call it whatever you want, but at the end of the day, you're being separated from the company and it does not feel good. And I talked about certain learnings I had from that experience. That video took off like crazy, and so many people reached out to me from all over the world saying, you articulated things I've thought about, and I've never had the guts to say it. And I'm like, life's too short to live like that, like it's your fault, because it's not your fault.
So is it helpful to say and get that conversation right in your own head? Because if I was laid off, of course it's miserable, and I wish it happened to nobody, but it does happen, and we all know it. So one thing I love about the internet is that a lot of conversations which are otherwise, shoot, don't tell anybody, have now started coming to the surface. So it could be your story, my story, and a lot of people who are watching their story. Does it help to have that conversation with yourself before you go out, and does it help to have that conversation with yourself saying, so I was laid out, I will go out and say it? Does that help?
Um, I think there are two things that matter. I read this somewhere. You need to figure out, are you sharing from your scars or are you sharing from your wounds? Because if you're sharing from your wounds, it's still very fresh. The wound is wide open and it's raw. So when you do that, you say things you regret later. If you're sharing from your scars, it's more like you're over it. You've recovered and you have a bit more distance to look at it objectively. So I think that's the first thing. And second, um, you know, I'm guessing you guys are active, right? On LinkedIn and social media in general. You'll see all kinds of posts out there. And there's so many posts that start with this, oh, woe is me, and so many bad things happened. And now look at me, right? So the intention matters, according to me. Are you sharing for attention because you want a dopamine hit? Or are you sharing because you think this might help one person who is currently struggling? And you are saying, hey, listen, I'm here if you want to reach out. So yes, you have to have that conversation. You have to go through the motions. It's change management, right? There's a process. There's anger, there's denial, all of that. So you have to go through the grief. It's a grieving process. And then the scar is a little bit more stitched up, and you're able to talk about it. But if it's still very raw, I highly recommend that you take some time and vent with family and friends, because it's safer to do it with them than out in the public. As we all know, you put something out in the on the internet, it lives forever and it'll follow you forever.
Yeah, I think you touch on a very important and probably a very sensitive time, and especially if you look at the time people have gone through. I think this is a phase where probably everybody has had to face with losses, whether it's personal lives, whether it's job, whether businesses or opportunities. So I think what you laid out is a very important facet of the first step towards rebuilding yourself, and that's actually so important in terms of I really love when you said that it's actually akin to being the grieving process. And if you acknowledge that and accept that and start transitioning through it in that manner, it only gives you that internal strength which you need to sort of recoup and get back better. So I think
Raji,
that
I
was
want to interrupt here before we take up the next question for Sonal to share her thoughts. I want us to highlight the word rebuild. And is it a part of rebuilding, or is it a part of building yourself, Sonal?
Is it a part of rebuilding or is it a part of building? Is that the question?
Yeah, I mean, when you have like a setback, or when you have what did you wish did not happen, and we are going through the grieving process where you are able to answer those questions to yourself before you can put yourself out there. So what would you call it? Would you call it rebuild, or would you call it build?
Uh, I think I honestly wouldn't be so hung up on the nomenclature of it, but what I will say is you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. So I would
Yeah.
say you're restarting, rebuilding, whatever it is. But Steve Jobs said you can only connect the dots backwards, not forwards. So the things we're going through right now, there are great moments, there are some terrible things that are going on. We don't know why they're going on. We will know in a few years' time. So looking back, I do think with all my heart, they were the best thing that happened to me. Because if they hadn't happened, my life wouldn't have taken a certain trajectory. And if that hadn't happened, this wouldn't. So, like domino effect. Um, I don't like saying, like many people, whatever happens, happens for the best. Yeah, some horrible things happen in the world. I'm not sure they're for the best. Uh, but I do know there is a clear reason. And every single experience makes you stronger, provided you're open. Because if you're not
Yeah.
open, then you're going to go through them again and again. And it's the universe trying to say, hey, I thought you'd learn your lesson by now, but you're still making those same mistakes. So, rebuild, apply, move on. And it's like that diamond that's been through extra heat and it shines even brighter because it went through extra heat.
Absolutely. In fact, it
Interesting.
reminds me of something which I used to tell my people, teams I used to work with all the time, saying that, guys, you're allowed to make the mistake once, or make a fresh mistake the next time, but don't repeat the same mistake. Right? So as long as you're making a new mistake each time, I think you're a great guy. But the moment you start making the same mistake again, then you either need to look for some other place to work, or you need to figure out something else that is exciting you to stop making those mistakes.
Yeah.
So it's basically boils down to that. So great. Well, Sonal, there's another interesting sort of I would say terminology that has emerged during the pandemic phase, which people call as class of 2020, right? If I was to sort of use that word, class of 2020 is something which refers to people who've passed out last year and have not gone through the formal education system of attending colleges, doing various stuff. Uh, so people who passed out in class of 2020, what's been your experience, both as a coach, as a recruiter, from the recruiter side, and also from the job seeker side? What has been different for them versus
Um,
the other
yeah. I think before I answer that, I'm just going to go off on a little bit of a tangent that I think as human beings, we tend to have a recency bias and we think that things are happening only to us and it's only happening now. So when you look back, I graduated with an MBA in 2009, which was a very bad financial crisis here in Europe. Imagine people who graduated in 2001, July, August, so September 2011, 2001. We know what happened in September 9/11.
yeah.
So, fuel crisis of 1987, Indira Gandhi 1984. I mean, like bad stuff happens. Companies have knee-jerk reactions. They pull back. Suddenly, the plans and the dreams you had, right, gone out the window. So it's not the first time it's happened. It's not the last time it's happened. Yes, the challenges have been unique, but I also think that people are stronger than they realize if they let themselves be strong enough. So my heart has gone out to anyone who graduated virtually. It's such a different experience. Simple things like graduation ceremonies, birthdays, parties, all of that stuff. But life is long. It's not like it's one opportunity and it'll never happen again. That can be recreated. But I think that when I compare job search then and now, when I say then, even for me 5, 10 years ago, 20 years ago versus now, there are many things that are similar. So there is no need to reinvent the wheel. And like I said, people think that certain things are only happening to them. Sometimes it's all about asking, like reaching out, talking to your parents, talking to your parents' friends when they were starting out. How did they do what we call networking, right? So yeah, things were different. Yes, you would get a letter in the post box if you've got in or not, and all of that stuff. Sure. So there's certain things that are similar, but I believe with all my heart that and this is an unpopular opinion, but I do think that yes, it's a little more competitive, but the youth today has access to tools that Rajiv, you and I didn't have, right? So LinkedIn, internet, it would mean like yellow pages, or it would mean like my dad, like someone, I just want to make, just want to get my foot in the door. Now, there's a little bit, more of a nudge, like, hey, I just found out there's actually this person in Bangalore, and you're in Bangalore, and this startup. It's so easy. I literally found out with a little thing, and it's this size, and everything about that person I know because of LinkedIn. So the tools are there. So when I hear youngsters saying it's really, really hard, and I'm like, have you done everything you possibly could? Say it with like the honest truth. And they're like, yeah. And then we talk, and I'm like, you've barely scratched the surface, right? So things are not going to be handed over. You got to work. And that hasn't changed from the time of our parents and grandparents. I would say those guys had it harder because they made huge sacrifices. But there are jobs today that didn't exist 5 years ago. So there's always a balanced view that I like to see, things, and not sort of just looking with my own lens. There's a lot of great things the youngsters are doing. I speak to a lot of wonderful CEOs on my podcast. And I had this lady who's amazing. Her name is Radhika Gupta. She's the CEO of Edelweiss Capital. She's very active on LinkedIn. And she's mentoring a woman in her early 20s. And she said the woman just refused to give up. She would reach out to the secretary, and she was like, I want to talk. And the secretary said, listen, Radhika, I can't ignore her anymore. She's lovely. You have to talk to her. That takes, persistence, resilience, whatever you want to call it. And they have deep conversations. And I'm like, that's amazing. Good for her. How resourceful. That's what you need. As opposed to sitting back, scrolling, thinking things are going to happen to you. And I always ask people, are you a complainer or are you an obtainer? The complainer is like, everything is wrong. Everybody's wrong. Poor me. And the obtainer is like, yeah, things suck right now. It's horrible right now. What can I do about it? Who can I become? And then take action.
No, I think that's so true. In fact, Urvina here says exactly what you just said, and she echoes your emotion, saying, my son graduated uh, last year, and what actually saw him through was his resilience, perseverance, and hope. Exactly what you said, and it's so true that Urvina is actually based out of London, and I think it's so true that if you're committed to something, and I like what you said, that uh, are you an obtainer or are you a complainer? And if you're complaining, you're actually coming from the victim side of life, and you will always stay a victim and
And
continue to sort of keep brooding about it.
Rajiv, no one likes to hear that. No one likes to hear that because nobody thinks they're a complainer. And I've brought it up in a few posts on LinkedIn and on YouTube, and I got a little bit of hate for it. And I'm like, you literally are proving my point. Like when they talk about scarcity, everything, I'm like, I don't have to say anymore. And I was like, you should block this person, report and block. I'm like, let it be. They're hurting their chances. There's this big green thing that says open to work, so people can see that you're open to work. And then, yeah, this is completely rubbish. I've been in recruiting for 40 years and you don't understand anything. I'm like,
Good for
how's
you.
it going, dude? How's it going for
Yeah,
you?
simple.
That
Good for you.
with the
Good for you. Yeah.
right, where is that going to take you, right? So nobody likes to hear that they're a complainer, but at the end of the day, it's really simple and there is no fine line.
So I'm going to talk about the opportunities that have now propped up, and some of them are called gig. Let's come up with the word startups. Let's come up with the word of freelancing, or freelancing was there, but it has now many more avatars. In your experience, as you speak to so many people who are in this space, do you feel that there are a lot more people now opting out of 9 to 5, or that continues and this as well? Or we're just so many more people?
It's a good question. I don't know for sure. I don't have enough data points on it, to be honest. I mean, I only have anecdotal experience, but I think there is a bit of people tend to exaggerate a little bit as well. They'll know three people, and then they'll be like, everyone is quitting 9 to 5, the Great Resignation, etc., etc. I'm not a huge fan of folks who bash corporate life. It's like, you know, you learn so much in corporate life, right? It's like your mom and dad, they brought you up, taught you everything you know, and you've left and you've graduated and you're like gone somewhere else and you're like, ha, what rubbish that was. I'm so happy I'm my own boss. I'm like, listen, there's a place for everything. Not everyone is meant to be entrepreneur. Not everyone has the appetite, to be honest, and the stomach to be a freelancer in the gig economy, whatever you want to call it. It's risky. It's unpredictable. You need to have a little bit of an you need to be a bit of a glutton for punishment, because you go through rejection after rejection after rejection, and then it's like, oh, I got one client like this month, and the rest of the time nothing. Whereas you get that steady income. So there's pluses and minuses. I do see people crazily hunting for jobs, and there are a lot more jobs out there, at least that I see in most parts of the world. And in my YouTube channel, I see comments every day, like, hey, these strategies work, I have 2 offers, what do you think I should do? I'm like, firstly, that's a great problem to have. You have 2 offers, right? Should I take this? Or such a difference from last year. And so I think it's at the end of the day, it's a very personal decision. What is your financial, staying power? How much of a cushion do you have? Are you okay to go certain months without any income at all? Because it will be tough. Very few people land on their feet with a line of corporate clients. It doesn't work that way. You need to do all of the work from scratch. Yes, you're doing it with experience, but it's a very different ball game. So I would say, yeah, there is a lot more. I do see more tendency of people saying, let me do a side hustle. So I still have my 9 to 5. This is a safe way for me to test the market, dip my toes in the water. I'm not yet ready to swim. And I'll give myself 6 months or 1 year. I see that. And I'm hoping the companies know they do that, because usually there's a conflict of interest. But that I think is a great way. But there is no one like formula. I think that this is the way to do it. When people are ready, they're ready. They'll know.
I want to know who painted freelance as this wonderful cafe sitting. There is Spotify in India, and they use this in their advertisements. They say pretending to work in a cafe. I don't know who painted freelancers to be this cafe sitting, coffee ordering, doing what at, I don't know, at 9:30 in the morning kind of work. But I'm still to meet more people who are doing that. So that's a
I'm
good
guessing
description of
I'm
it.
guessing it could be the likes of Cafe Coffee Day at Costa Coffee, because it's good for business.
It's good for business, I'm sure. But I want to know who painted the freelance world, because imagine trying to be your own business development, your own HR, your own tech, and still trying to push through whatever value that you wish to put out in the world. So I really wonder where this wonderful image came from, but I'm glad to
Yeah,
know that
there's a
it's a
lot of information out there on how amazing it is. Very few talk about how hard it is, but that's not fun to share.
yeah, it's not how I've seen it. So Rajiv,
So
do you want
I
to?
think it's, yeah, I believe there's always 2 sides to this. In fact, as I always say, there are 3 sides to every situation,
Yeah.
right? Your side, my side, and the real side. And the real side is something that nobody ever wants to talk about. We can keep arguing about what your side and my side is, and we can either agree to disagree or agree to agree and continue life. But the third side, which is the real side, is the reality, which very few people, like what we've been saying, are either willing to face or willing to confront with or challenge themselves against, and then take action on it. Because those who do that are the guys and the people who will actually be successful. The rest of them can keep waiting, and that's actually the truth. And in my own experience, in my own journey as a professional, as I work with people, and I completely second what you said. People just don't want to listen to the truth. They don't want to listen what is real. But I think that's what has to change, and that is probably the slow process of what can hopefully make things better for people, right? in terms of where it is. Coming to something that you touched upon, and I really want to touch upon that, is the fact that you spoke about the job market scenario evolving and changing. And if I go back to some data points that one is seeing here in India, uh, at least over the last few quarters, I'd say at least last 2 quarters, people have been talking about increasing numbers of job opportunities, especially in the IT sector, especially in the sort of business processing sector, where people are saying there are opportunities available. And what you just now described about people having multiple offers and trying to be able to negotiate in a much better position seems to be sort of emerging somewhere or the other, right? Now, how has been your experience on that? How has been your experience with uh, the jobs market scenario? Because on one side, we hear about a lot of gloom, a lot of job losses, a lot of opportunities gone away. Now, on the other side, we also hear about the fact that there are opportunities, people are negotiating, people are getting it. What's your version of it? What's your first-hand experience of how things have been like, both on the job market scenario and what's happening around in whichever part of the world that you've been working at? It's so would like to hear your perspective.
So my clients are global, so I don't have a unique point of view for one country only. I will say that there are certain industries where hiring was happening in 2020 like crazy, like not stopping. And I've had, guests on my podcast and they were like, this was my best year. So, my clients were negotiating, they were getting multiple offers. Granted, not a lot of them are mainstream companies, but they were growing like crazy and they needed, what are the two places typically where companies need help, right? One is customer service, one is sales. So on both sides. The others are like, they come up later when the profitability is there. So that at this time, I think particularly after the second quarter, um, in where I am in this part of the world, this is back to school season. So, schools have opened up after the summer break. People are back at work. Hiring has completely like shot up like crazy. I saw a post on Twitter 2 days ago where a recruiter was offered $100,000 sign-on bonus. A recruiter. So that tells you that the recruiting profession is important because people are realizing we have a paucity of the skill set that we need to take our profitability to the next level. So I would say that particularly in tech, but I would also say in classic B2B, chemical, construction, automobile. I'm hearing everywhere people are hiring. So it's very encouraging to hear that. It feels like pre 2019 levels in terms of data. I also heard the head of Indeed talking. In fact, he was speaking from the India headquarters, Indeed.com, and they were like, actually, it's up compared to 2019, 7% up. So those are great. Those are great, great signs. And what a job seeker has to realize, whether they are a fresh graduate or someone with tons of experience, they have to realize they have some leverage, and they shouldn't just take whatever comes their way. um, they should be in a position where they can choose. I don't like the word should, but don't take whatever comes your way because you're desperate. You got to see for fit. You don't want to be in a job where you think you're getting the wrong signals. You're not sure it's the right company. The boss was a bit weird, or they asked you weird bias based questions, but you're like, I'll say yes, whatever, I'll do anything. And then 3 months later you're miserable, like completely burnt out. So I think that because things are opening up, do your best in terms of your research and your homework.
Good. I think that's an interesting perspective of what you can do to be able to manage the uncertain times around you. And I think, and when I say uncertain times, it's a very personal situation that every person is in at this point in time.
Yeah.
uh, and one must acknowledge and respect that every individual makes the choices he or she makes based on their own individual circumstances, right? Having said that, the good news, as you said, is that markets are opening up, opportunities are coming back on the table. uh, what was earlier a closed door, uh, there are opportunities just sort of opening up. So I think perseverance, resilience, and hope, genuinely have a place in the mind of what probably one needs to seek out for at the moment. I think that's what it looks like. I think that's quite encouraging. uh, what do you have to say, Priyanka?
I would not. Actually, what I want to say is here Sonal for the experience she carries. Here Sonal for what she wishes to share with you, but here Sonal for how she puts her communication out there. It's a latent topic. It is difficult to understand. I love working in that field, and I love it how she is able to break down what she wants to say, crystallize her thoughts, get it articulated. I don't know what English is used, and I'm sure it's a lot of hard work that she puts in to get her thoughts crystallized. And when she talks, it makes sense. And when she talks, she's able to put that in bite sized nuggets, which are easy to remember. And which is why you should go back to what Superchargers do and the channel that she runs on YouTube and pick up your notes. You would be surprised to recollect how simply she put that point out and how wonderfully that point turned up in your head when you needed it most. So, Sonal, appreciate you for what you do. But what are your top 3 tips for somebody who's looking out?
Okay, thank you. Top 3 tips. So I'm going to contradict myself a little bit. Particularly, I'm guessing we're talking about someone who's starting a first job, right? That tip is don't be too picky right now. You haven't worked before. You are someone who is not a tried and tested product. So take whatever comes your way, give it your best. You will not know what you're good at if you don't try many different things. So, there's a lot of overthinking that happens at that age. I've been there. Get onto something. You're not married to it. You can leave at any time. I would say that's number one. Number two is something that I already shared. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. There's no need to think you're alone. Have a community around you, whether it's a bunch of your friends from university. They are not your competition. Your only competition is you from 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 2 years ago. That's it. Everyone else is your collaborator. There is no competition, there's collaboration. So what does that mean? Make a little club. When opportunities come, everyone can get them. Reach out. Your dad knows someone who's heading procurement at Google. Ooh, dad, that's so embarrassing. I'm not gonna just put your ego, check it at the door. It doesn't matter. It's only gonna help you. And the third thing I'm gonna say is try and think back when you're in your classroom and there's a teacher and suddenly, I don't know, it's somebody's birthday or there's a bag of goodies. And it's like, who gets those goodies? It's the ones who raise their hand, right? I want. So when something comes up, think of it like it's a bunch of sweets. Say, yes, I want to do it. Whether you know how to do it or not, doesn't matter. You will learn. They don't expect you to be Elon Musk right now. So the only way to learn is to take action and to do. So volunteer, put your hand up for anything that comes that you think is exciting, but you self-sabotage and you hold yourself back because you think you're not ready. I got news for you. You're never going to be ready. I'm 42. I still don't feel ready. It doesn't matter. Yeah, you're never going to grow up. We keep growing. We keep growing. We keep evolving. When people say, but kids and grown-ups, are they grown-ups? Are we really grown up? We're not done growing. So that long-term mindset is very important. The thing that you think is happening to you, trust me, it won't matter 1 year later. It won't matter 5 years later. You will not even remember it 10 years later. So don't have that mindset. Focus on the long term. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So I think these are my 4 tips.
Yeah, and I have to say, follow Sonal for the work she does, but please follow Sonal. She's for sure for how good is she with her communication. It's a latent topic. It's something that you learn only from experience. Yeah. So over to you, Rajiv.
Yeah, I think there's a question that Urvina has asked Sonal, and a very interesting question. She talks about the fact saying, what's your take on the fact that women getting back to work? It seems we have gone back on gender equality due to the pandemic and choices women had to make due to the increased workload at home and at work. So what's been your experience on that? I think that's a brilliant question. Thanks, Urvina.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a very sensitive question because the answer is not an easy answer. I think there are multiple ways of looking at it. And my way of looking at it is very unpopular. And that is that this needs a conversation in a marriage. This needs a frank discussion between husband and wife, two partners in a marriage. Taking on more work at home. Let's say you have a full-time job. Your partner has a full-time job. You both are working 8, 10 hours a day. And let's say you have kids, right? You come home. What is traditionally the case, and this is not India, Asia, this is the whole world. Women take on the bulk of the work at home, housework, right? So that has to change. And the only way it will change is by having some difficult conversations with your partner. So even things like language, I'm digressing a little bit, but even things like language, like the words we use, the dad will say, Saturday, okay, you're going out. That's okay, I'll babysit the kids. You're not babysitting your children. They are your children. You're being a dad.
Yes.
You're being a dad. So stop saying babysitting, right? When the mom is doing it, it's if the mom
It's
said
mom.
babysitting, if the mom said babysitting, it would be a scandal. Like Twitter would go nuts. Okay. So it would, things like the wife is doing the dishes and the husband's like, how can I help? Like I'm helping around the house. You're not helping.
Yeah.
You're adulting. This is your
Yeah.
house and my house. So in the perfect world, it's 50-50. So these are conversations that I don't think we can have them with companies first. We need to have them at home. And then the CEOs, if they are male CEOs, they need to have those conversations with their wives. So without that, I always think like it starts with the individual, right? Then it's a couple. Then it's a company, it's a society, all of that. But it always starts with the individual. So for women I have friends who have been through this. I have a friend who walked out. It was horrible. She walked out after years and years of going through this. It was horrible. Gender equality. And the funny thing is, she works in gender equality. Like, that's her job. And she, like, for 2 months, she went and lived with a friend. She said, I can't do this anymore. I have so many sacrifices. I've done so many sacrifices. You do literally nothing, this, and I do this. And she's like, enough is enough. So the husband, what happened with him? He got the shock of his life. He had to do everything suddenly because she was not reachable. So this is not a coincidence that you're suddenly seeing an uptake in. I have a friend who's a divorce lawyer. She said 2020 was my best year. I mean, we're joking about it, but like COVID, you can't blame COVID. You can't blame things that are happening. It's something that has been bubbling, and we're going on a separate theme now. But the thing is, it manifests itself, right? So, question being, back to work, women should do whatever the heck they want to do, and men should do whatever the heck they want to do. But it's, for me, a conversation that has to happen, an agreement. If the woman says, actually, I don't feel like working, that's absolutely fine. For me, it comes down to choice. Make the choice and don't have the choice imposed on you.
Actually, these are those uncomfortable questions that the first jobbers, and nobody tells you when you pass out of college. When you pass out of college, you think the world
Nobody
is your
tells
oyster.
you. Nobody tells you.
Nobody
in your 40s
tells you you are the lady who will eventually grow up to realize you are being paid less, because it is how people have discovered the harder way world over.
And remember what I said: if you don't ask, you won't get.
Yeah.
So
nobody tells that to you when you finish your college. Nobody sits you down in an auditorium and tells that, listen, the women are going to grow up, and there is a biological cycle, and that there will be demands, and there is a society, and there is a pressure, and those things kind of come to you the harder way. Of course, you go to college thinking you'll be the next best thing that happened to corporate world, and then reality catches up. So it's good to know
I think
true for the world over.
I think reality is what you make of it. So I think I am generalizing, but I think the millennials, I don't like labels, but the Gen X, whatever you call them, I think that they care more about this, and there's more fearlessness, and I think that it's going in the right direction.
I agree.
I think in fact, me and Priyanka were having a conversation today morning only. and on very similar lines, not around this, but this is related about how uncomfortable questions need to be brought out to the surface and what probably needs to be done about it. So we get one more confirmation both from Urvina, who's asked this question, and Sonal reaffirming what we were also discussing, Priyanka. So that's one point. And I so agree with what you just said, Sonal. I think, and the way you described it, that at the end of it, the microorganism of society is uh, the individual, and that's where everything starts with. So whether it's a couple, whether it's a family, whether it's a team, whether it's a larger team, whether it's an organization, whether it's a society, the only point I think that's important is, and that's something that I just want to say, by for wrapping up this point, at least at this point in time, is saying is that I think also, to add to what you said, I think it's time that once such things must be called out where they need to be called out. That's number one. And number two, a lot of lip service and hypocrisy that's happening under the name of some of these activities somewhere has to stop. And I say that because it's because of these, and the example you quoted. Imagine a person who's a professional who's advising organizations for these areas is going through what we're talking about, right? And you can very well imagine what's really the situation here. So we choose to use gender equality and women returning to work and giving the tags of diversity and trying to do some tick services around it. And I say that very consciously here. I think it's time that people in positions of leadership, people in positions of responsibility, take cognizance of that and either do something around it which is serious. Otherwise, uh, whether it's a
Definitely
pandemic,
not.
whether it's a recession, whether it's not a recession, nothing will change.
I think that, yeah, absolutely right. It's easy to say it, and it's easy to call it out. Let me say that, right? What Urvina said, the next generation will handle it better. I don't know that. I think they will. But everything, according to me, starts with a conversation. You've got to start the conversations. So we live in this culture, you guys have seen cancel culture, right? On Twitter, suddenly there's attacking one person, and suddenly that person no longer has, their career has gone down the dump. Whether it's a celebrity, oh my God, she said this about Modi, and it's done. Like she's so people are not given a chance. Sometimes we make mistakes publicly, right? So I think before we call people out, we have to have those conversations privately, because there's a lot of dirty, how do you say it, dirty linen being washed in the public. When we don't have those conversations privately and we go directly, we are basically, for someone or the other, we're killing their career, right? And people don't know. I mean, 10, 20 years ago, things, it's a generation difference. I mean, when we speak a certain way, yeah, dads have said for ages babysitting my children, but now, yeah, me too, all of that. So there's so many things we're learning and we're evolving. When we watch some movies, are like, oh my God, like this sounds so ancient, how could the woman say that? It was okay back then. Everything for me starts with a conversation, and having those, like, listen guys, we think this is lip service, this is our perception, and perception is reality. This is what we think is necessary to do to move in the right direction. And if they still don't care, everyone has a choice. Walk out,
Yeah,
call them
absolutely.
out, call them out, do whatever you want, but it's not like they weren't already warned about it, right?
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. I think this has been probably a fabulous conversation we've had, and uh, although the last part of it, I think so, we picked up a topic which was not probably core to, but I think it was very useful to have that, as they say,
It's
in the
It's
discussion.
Urvina's fault.
No, it's not her fault. I think she brought out a very interesting point. In fact, this calls for another conversation about what, because this is actually a very important topic, and thanks for
I
calling
think
that
it
out.
deserves its own. It deserves
It
its own
deserves
show.
its own space of time.
Yes, absolutely, it does. It
There's
does. Right, and I think
that's
that's been fabulous. So thanks a lot, Sonal, for your time, your kindness, your advice, and agreeing to be on this show. Uh, as always, it's a pleasure talking to you. Uh, Keep shining, and as I always say, keep being the rock star that you are.
Thank
and
you very much.
I have a minute to slip in Urvina's response, and she says, I accept the blame, but I can only thank her for bringing it up. It opens another conversation, which we hopefully will touch upon sooner than later.
Bye bye.
Thank you for being here.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. I'll end
Thank
the
you.
broadcast.